Hello, welcome to the Matchbook Horse Racing podcast or Periscope, depending on how you are joining us for the end of the week, where we are going to be previewing a Friday card at Newmarket, and we will then, subsequent to this, put out a podcast previewing the Saturday action as well, which is now coined Super Saturday or Mad Saturday or Crazy No One Can Book a Jockey Saturday, whatever you want to call it. Rory Delargy joins me the other side of the screen. We'll start with Friday. Quick, how are you, Rory? All well? All good?
All well and good, yes.
Still showing off those timeful manuals in the back of shop. I like it.
Yeah, I've got a few spares if anyone's interested in buying them.
I like that as well.
my wife would be delighted if she thought I was trying to sell some of my extras.
Exactly, yeah. What are you doing here? I'm just selling the books. Okay, that's fine. Quite right too. Let's get stuck into the Friday action first of all, because that's what we're going to be previewing in this instalment. And the feature on Friday afternoon at Newmarket is, of course, the Falmouth Stakes. Speaking to Carl Burke up in York yesterday morning, he was suggesting that, quite rightly, that Lawrence he felt would have had a great chance, but she's not there. And they've looked at the field and gone, we'd have loved to have had her in that, because it may or may not be the strongest renewal of the Falmouth. But the betting currently with Matchbook looks like one master is 3.75, 3/4 of a point bigger is Kabbalah, around about the 4.5 mark. First of the 3-year-olds in there. You then go up an extra half a point for Beshier, and in turn an extra half a point up to 5.5 to I Can Fly. Then they get a little bit bigger. I'll hand it straight over to you, Rory, though. First of all, do you like a 3-year-old as opposed to a 4-year-old in this, or take the race on merit year upon year and no hard and fast rules about age group with this one?
No hard and fast rules. It's been dominated by the 3-year-olds in recent seasons, but then again we've either had reasonably weak races or we've had exceptional 3-year-olds, and you go back a little bit further and it was very hard for 3-year-olds to win for the best part of a decade before that. So you got to take it year on year. There's no magic way of ruling them out other than analysing the form that they've shown. So in this instance, I shall be opposing the favourites, but not the favourites, the 3-year-olds.
I will be doing the same, but I'll also be going against those towards the top of the market. I mean, personally, this race is certainly the top two in the market, a litany of bets that have gone down. I backed one master last time and did put her up on the Matchbook pod, and look, she was a gallant third at a big price. I still think she saw out that mile, even though I know some are crabbing her and saying she might be better over a bit shorter, but I still think she saw it out. I thought she was just beaten by a couple of better horses on the day, perhaps. She's rated 113 off the back of that and was before, so I suppose she's entitled to be favourite. Kabbalah I backed at the Curragh. Goodness me, she was very disappointing.
She had her excuses though, didn't she, on the day, Kabbalah? She
did, but she ultimately she was well held on the day. But yes, she had her excuses. I thought she ran okay in the Guineas itself, and she was only beaten a length and a quarter on that occasion. But one that I wanted to go straight in with is a filly I haven't backed yet this year, and I wasn't sure that I said at the start of the season that she was one always to oppose, because I felt she was always going to go off at a short enough price. She did. She went off very skinny on reappearance at Newmarket. She was then 3.0 at Epsom, where she was disappointing on that occasion. She was a bigger price when last seen at Royal Ascot. But the 8.0 about Voracious, I'd never take a short price about her. They put the tongue tie on a few starts ago. They said to Michael Stoute at the start of the year they were trying to work out her best trip. But I quite like her style of racing. I don't think you want to get too far back at the July course. And all of a sudden, having thought I would never back her this season, I think she's a fair enough price. She's rated 108. She's not got a huge amount to find. So Michael Stoute's got a decent enough record in this race. And I'd imagine that Cheveley Park and he would have always had an eye on this sort of race with her, or this race in particular with her, after Integral a few years ago. And all of a sudden, 8.0, Rory, I want Voracious on side.
Yeah, I can listen. She doesn't have a huge amount to find, as you say, and your objections to her in the past have been that she maybe isn't one to take a very skinny price to buy. But the more competitive the race, the more she's likely to give her running. I thought she ran a solid race last time out, but I think when you get to this level, if you're talking about what horses have to find, I happily back handicappers who I think of £5 or £6 to find. But when it comes to Group 1 races, unless you've got a very good reason why a horse is going to find 5 points of improvement, it can be an awful lot to find with the top animals. And there's no obvious reason why Voracious will improve here. You know, you just know that she's fairly competitive on form. She's certainly run to her form with the tongue tie in her last 2 starts. She won't lack from assistance in the saddle. I just thought she was lagging behind a little bit here when you compare her to the standout mare in the race, is One Master. The one thing you've got to say here is most of these fillies have been taking each other on, whereas One Master comes here having looked by far the likeliest winner of the Queen Anne last time out. And whatever you say about the miling division generally, it is very competitive, and racing against the colts and the older horses, the geldings. She looked more than a match for them for much of that race, and I would tend to agree that she was outstayed in the end. I think it's one of those, I think arguments about stamina are never absolute. You don't simply say this horse doesn't stay because, other people will say she's beaten the rest very well. She didn't noticeably stop on the run to the line, but she injected pace into the race and got plenty of others in trouble, and then wasn't able to sustain that as well as it looked like she would. And for me, she will be better over a slightly sharper mile. I would say that the mile here in the Falmouth is slightly sharper. You do have an uphill finish, but it's not as stiff as Ascot, where you're pretty much against the collar for the majority of the race. And I'm pretty sure that a repetition of her run at Ascot will win her the race. So while that doesn't necessarily make her a bet in most circumstances, I'm surprised she's as big as she is. I thought she'd be a shorter price favourite on the back of that Queen Anne run.
One Master around about 3.75 heads the betting currently. I'm being a bit of a chicken, but like the bigger price about Voracious, who's 8.0. But I certainly take that One Master is the one to beat off the back of that run last time at Royal Ascot in the Royal Ascot Opener. Before that, Rory, we've got the Duchess of Cambridge, Group 2 for the fillies over 6 furlongs. Just a quick line on that. I can see why Raffle Prize is the price she is 5.0 compared to the price about Dyer, who's around about the 2.5 mark, and she was very good. Both fillies were very good at Ascot. Raffle Prize has got the penalty here, but I think she's pretty smart. Now I know she was running to Dyer on debut at Newmarket, but she's clearly got a lot better than that. I like her style of racing, particularly for this track, and not so much Dyer, who was very good when winning an Ascot. But I thought Raffle Prize, even trying to give a bit of weight away here, I thought she could be a bet as the price is having. Yeah, quite a bit between them. How do you see the course at Newmarket on the July course? I always have it in my head year upon year that obviously it depends on the size of the field, how much pace there is. But personally, I wouldn't want any horse I'm siding with to get too far back.
No, I very much agree with that. You need to be in a good position coming down the hill, as we've seen time and again. Yes, you do have the uphill finish. It's not as severe, I would say, as on the Rolly Mile. And year in, year out of this meeting, we see horses who are ridden aggressively coming out on top on a regular basis. Obviously, you can't go mad from the front. You need to have a jockey who can judge the pace to a nicety. But she's got that in the shape of Frankie Dettori. So in form terms, the prices make perfect sense. His Dyer beats Raffle Prize on debut. They've both improved since. They've both won big races at Royal Ascot. Raffle Prize dropping back to 5 furlongs for the Queen Mary, where her stamina kicked in late and she beat the US filly. And Dyer went to the Albany over 6, which was a more suitable race for most high-class juvenile fillies. But obviously it's only got Group 3 status, the Queen Mary is Group 2. And as a result, Raffle Prize has a penalty to carry where Dyer doesn't. And I think most people would say that the quality of those races this year was very similar between the two. You wouldn't say the Queen Mary was a stronger race than the Albany. And that's frequently the case these days. I guess you go back far enough, the Queen Mary was the race to win if you had speedy filly at Royal Ascot. The Albany's come into vogue a lot more recently. So the penalty clearly makes life tougher for Raffle Prize. And it's obvious that it's there, and it's maybe a little bit unfair in the context of this race. So Raffle Prize has to be a fair bit bigger in the betting than Daya, particularly as they met on debut. And Daya came out on top, and that was on the Rolling Mile here, similar track. But I take your point that we've seen time and again over the last few weeks that tactics decide races rather than simply pre-race ratings. And Raffle Prize looks, I wouldn't say she's assured of an easy lead, but I think she's the likeliest leader in this field, despite the fact that you've got the Final Song and Bredenbury can go forward as well. I think Raffle Prize will probably lead, and Frankie has an opportunity to nick it against a very talented but much less experienced rider in David Egan. So it'll be a real test of David Egan here to make sure that Frankie doesn't give him the slip, because this might not come down to weights at all. It could easily come down to tactics. I think Daya is the likeliest winner. I think she is the better of the two fillies, but that's not, it's early days for both of them. They're both very promising. And as the prices stand at the moment, I can certainly see the argument that there's marginal value with Raffle Prize, given what the limiting factors will be on the day.
As far as Friday goes, it's going to shape my weekend personally, punting-wise. It's either going to be good or very bad. I've got more horses in the book for Friday than I do Saturday, so I'll just run through a couple more if I can, and then throw over to you, Rory, for the rest of the day. First of all, curveball over at Chester. Infrastructure, a horse we talked about on the Match for Betting podcast going into last weekend. Didn't run, didn't get in. He was the first reserve. We knew what was going to happen. We knew our fate. He is, as it stands, in a very early market, outsider of the field of 7 at Chester in the 6:55. Now, he might want further. He might want better ground. All of things are possibilities, but I'm convinced he's a very well-treated horse off a mark of 90. His Chester form tells us that, because the horse that beat him in a maiden there is now rated 104. And also, he finished ahead of Argentello, now rated 104. Chief Ironside, who beat him that day, is now rated 108. I'm sure 90 underestimates this horse. If he continues to hover around the bottom of the betting, I think he's a horse you definitely want to have on side. Whether or not this is going to be the ideal test for him, but he's just a horse that his next couple of runs I think I want to have on side. The other, feel free to add to that when you next pick up, Rory. The other horse that I want to bet is Solid Stone in the 150. Newmarket, I think he's not well drawn, but I think he's better than he showed in the London Gold Cup. I'm sure of that. This trainer and these connections have gone down this slow burner middle distance handicap route with some very, very good and subsequent group winning horses in the past. And I think that this horse could still leave his mark behind him. As I say, the draw, given that they go sharply into a quick, or they swiftly go into a bend, given his running style, I don't know if it's ideal, but again, I think he's better than his current mark, and around about 11.0, I will back Solid Stone in the 150 at Newmarket. All yours, Rory.
Yeah, just touch on those two. Solid Stone was backed as if defeat was out of the question at one stage in that London Gold Cup, and the discussion at the time around that race was that it throws up group winners every single year, and he sort of fit the bill as a horse who would step up markedly. Disappointed on the day. The odd thing was that Sir Michael Stout couldn't train a loser at that stage. He was firing winners left, right, and centre that weekend, and Solid Stone was the only horse he disappointed. Clearly better than he showed there. One of two, interestingly, here carrying the side Sue Hill colours. He actually carried the second colours on the day, but I think there's nothing much to read into that. But Ryan Moore rides Walk in the Sand for Richard Hannum, and you'd have thought there'd be perfectly good opportunity for him. People will imagine to ride Solid Stone. I don't know what Ryan's minimum weight is these days, though. So it may simply have come down to a matter of knowing that he'd be low in the weights, and Ryan making a decision early to ride the other one. No doubt we'll read somewhere today what the thinking is there. But yes, he's an interesting one. And similarly, Infrastructure. I mean, I was
8.6, so he'd have been on the cusp of Solid Stone, who carries 8.6. So maybe there is something in that.
No, yeah. When both of them they're similar prices in the early market, and sometimes when a jockey doesn't have an awful lot to go on, the idea of having dinner or not having dinner can sway you a little bit.
I'm very tempted to say, who would you rather have in the saddle, PJ or Ryan Moore? But I'm not going to go there. I won't say that. We don't need to throw those sorts of questions out on this podcast.
Yeah, and getting on to infrastructure. Yeah, similarly, I was all over him last weekend, knowing that he probably wasn't getting in. I put him up the time before that, and he came out because of the grind. He does seem to need grind on the fast side of good. So it remains to be seen. I think the advance going for Chester is good. It's probably not ideal for him, as you said, in terms of trip. But I can't believe he's going to be sent off outsider of the field. I think he would have been nearly favourite at Haydock last weekend if he'd got in. So he can't really be the outsider of the field at Chester. It's one of those. I'd rather back him in a race that really suits him down to the ground. And it's slightly surprising because I thought he had a chance of. Well, he probably would have missed the cut as well. Was he in the John Smith's Cup?
Yep.
Yeah.
What I had him, which is what I'm not sure where he was on that line, but that's what I had in mind.
He may have been missing the cut there as well, but they may have something in mind later in the season for him now. But he remains very interesting. You've made the case about why he's well handicapped. I also made that last week in terms of how his reappearance run at Newmarket panned out when he was best with those held up in a race where the leaders dominated, and the horse who finished behind him was placed in the Royal Hunt Cup next time out. So there's lots to like about him. In terms of Friday, I'm not going to go through the card in depth. I thought the opening race was a really tough one. I haven't come to a definite conclusion yet, but I did quite like one in the mile and 6 handicap. I do like the mile and 6 handicaps as a rule. We tend to always be looking forward to the Ebor. Ben Vraki is interesting. He's going to go a favourite here. Having finished third at Royal Ascot, or rather second at Royal Ascot, and his reappearance just touched off after a slow start and being forced wide. He's beautifully bred. He's by Frankel, but he's out of Kinnaird, who was a top class race mare for Pat Haslam back in the day. She won the Prix de l'Opera, I think, or the Prix Vermeil as a when racing for Pat. And she was a top-notch race mare who developed with time as well. So Ben Vraki should keep doing better. The interesting thing about him is when he's been slowly away, he's run really well in his last 2 starts. 2 starts prior to that, when he actually managed to get away on terms, he ran poorly. So still a slight question mark about him, although I think his issues last year were that he probably didn't have the strength. He was probably growing at various stages. He only made his debut last summer. He's a big horse, and he's probably needed a winter to strengthen into his frame. The chances are that he's a group horse in the making, but you'd need to be rated 104 here. And I didn't think he was the only group horse in this race. I thought Outbox is a horse with serious prospects of winning group races as well. He was just touched off in a listed race at Chantilly in his return. Another son of Frankel, very, very well bred as well, out of Emirates Queen. He was a high-class race mare as well. But his final start last year reads tremendously well. Now, he ran in a conditions race at Newbury. He beat Elegiac, rather, Aspitar. And the second and third are group horses. Aspitar was running in the Grand Prix de Chantilly, won that in June, and you would have thought on the collateral form that Outbox is of similar standard. There wasn't a huge amount between the first 3 that day, but they've all gone on to frank the form. He probably just needed the run when he was beaten in listed company last time out. Simon Christopher places his horses really well. I thought there was as much to like about him as there was about Ben Vraki, and one of them's sort of 4.0, and the other one's nudging 9 or 10. So I'd rather be with Outbox at these prices. For all, Ben Vraki is also a very interesting contender.
Yeah, Outbox around about 9.0 at the moment, about 5 points bigger than the current favourite Ben Vraki. Outbox for Andrew Zeni and Simon Christopher. Is that best bet material for you, Rory, for the weekend? For Friday, sorry.
Yeah, at this, as long as the prices hold up, there's every chance that Outbox will be the Delargy nap on the day.
Good stuff. outbox for Rory as far as a best bet goes, around about 9.0 for that 3 o'clock at Newmarket. As far as my best bet goes, what I've mentioned a fair few, I think raffle prize at 5.0 for the Duchess of Cambridge is the one I'll stick up for the best play on the day, hoping that Frankie gets the job done. Again, unbelievable comments from Mark Johnson afterwards, talking about Lester Piggott and saying that Frankie that is the best there's ever been. I think he was delighted with the performance of the horse on the day. So there we are, and we'll find out soon just what his horse does in the July Stakes, Mark Johnson. So that'll be interesting to see. Rory, thank you very much indeed. If any of you at home want to buy any of those books, Rory on Twitter. That's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, that'll do. Yeah.
No, he doesn't drive too hard a bargain. Rory, thanks very much. We're going to talk Saturday very shortly, so look out for that subsequent to this going out on all the usual platforms for our Saturday racing preview. But that is it for Friday's Matchbook podcast. Very best of luck wherever you play.